You know, there's something we rarely talk about: what happens after the person who keeps running finally finds themselves alone. We often see the story from the side of the one who's left the person wondering what they did wrong, why they weren't enough, why someone could just walk away from something that felt so real. But what about the other side? What about the avoidant, the one who pushes away love, not because they don't feel it, but because feeling it scares them more than losing it? See, people who avoid deep emotional connection aren't heartless. They're terrified, terrified of needing someone, terrified of being seen, terrified that if they open up, it'll all come crashing down. So they run not away from you, but from what they fear love will expose inside them. But here's the truth no one tells you. After they push the right person away, there's silence, and in that silence, something shifts. The very thing they tried to avoid begins to echo inside them. At first, they tell themselves they're fine. They throw themselves into distractions, work, friends, meaningless conversations, maybe even someone new. But at night, when everything's quiet, they feel the absence of the one who made them feel safe enough to be seen. And then regret shows up, not always loud, but heavy. Because when you push away someone who saw your soul and loved you anyway, you don't just lose a relationship, you lose your chance at peace. You lose the person who loved you without trying to fix you, who stayed even when you made it hard to stay. What avoidants don't admit is that they replay moments the way you looked at them when they couldn't look back, the patience you had when they pulled away, the quiet hurt in your voice when they did it again. They remember it all, and while they might never say it out loud, they wonder if they'll ever find that kind of connection again. Here's the part that's hard for both sides. People who push away love often believe they're protecting themselves, but what they're really doing is protecting their pain. They're guarding an old wound that love was actually trying to heal. And until they face that wound, they'll keep losing good people and calling it fate. But the story doesn't have to end there, because sometimes heartbreak becomes the teacher that breaks the cycle. Sometimes, after pushing away the right person, the avoidant finally realizes it wasn't safety they needed, it was courage. The courage to let someone love them even when they didn't feel lovable. So, if you're the one who's been pushed away, know this: you didn't fail. You showed someone what love can feel like, and if you're the one who keeps pushing away, it's not too late. You can still turn around. You can still learn to stay. Love doesn't demand perfection. It just asks that we stop running long enough to be found. Avoidants aren't cold, they're scared. That's the truth most people never see. When someone pulls away, becomes distant, or shuts down emotionally, it's easy to think they don't care. It's easy to label them as detached, selfish, or emotionally unavailable. But beneath that calm surface is a person fighting an invisible battle, a battle with fear, not indifference. Their distance isn't a lack of love, it's a defense mechanism. It's their way of keeping control in a world where closeness feels dangerous. For many avoidants, this pattern didn't begin in adulthood. It's a learned response, often rooted in experiences where vulnerability led to pain. Maybe they grew up in an environment where showing emotion was punished, ignored, or misunderstood. Maybe the people they trusted the most once made them feel small, unseen, or unworthy. So they built walls, quiet, invisible walls that promised safety. Over time, those walls became part of their identity. To love deeply now feels like stepping into a storm without shelter. Every time someone gets too close, their body and mind remember the hurt of being let down before, so they withdraw. It's not personal, it's protective. When an avoidant meets someone who sees them, truly sees them, something shifts inside. They feel drawn in and terrified at the same time. Connection feels magnetic but overwhelming. The closer love gets, the more it threatens the fragile sense of safety they've built. So they create distance. They might become quieter, less affectionate, or overly focused on practical things. They might even start arguments or find reasons to leave. To outsiders, it looks cruel. To them, it feels like survival. Because in their mind, if they leave first, they can't be left behind. If they stay distant, they can't be hurt. But the irony is that what they fear most, rejection and abandonment, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They push away the very people who want to love them, and afterward they often sit with a quiet kind of sadness that they can't name. Deep down, they know they're not cold, they're scared. They know their heart feels more than they allow themselves to express. They just don't trust love enough to believe it won't turn into pain. Their fear isn't just about losing someone, it's about losing control. To love someone fully means surrendering that control, letting someone in far enough that they could hurt you, disappoint you, or leave you. That level of openness is terrifying for someone who's used to being self-reliant. But every time they hold back, they also hold back joy, peace, and genuine connection. They end up trapped between the need for love and the fear of it. The truth is, avoidants feel deeply. They crave closeness but struggle to receive it. They long to be understood but rarely allow others to get close enough to do so. Their silence, their distance, their retreat is not a reflection of how little they care, but of how much it costs them to feel. They're not unfeeling, they're protecting themselves from feeling too much. After they push you away, silence becomes their teacher. In the beginning, that silence feels like freedom. It feels like relief. The noise of emotional closeness has quieted, and they can finally breathe again. For someone who's used to guarding their emotions, that initial space feels safe, predictable, and familiar. They tell themselves it was the right decision, that they needed distance, that things had become too much. They convince themselves that love was suffocating, that they were better off alone. But as the days pass, the silence that once felt peaceful starts to sound different. It grows heavy, echoing with the absence of the person they pushed away. It's in that quiet that realization begins to whisper. At first, they ignore it, burying themselves in distractions, work, hobbies, social media, anything to avoid stillness. But avoidance only lasts so long, because sooner or later, the human heart demands to be heard. Late at night, when there's nothing left to scroll through, they find themselves thinking about the laughter they used to share, the comfort of having someone who understood them without words. They start to feel the weight of what they've lost, even if they can't admit it out loud. Silence has a way of stripping away illusions. Without the noise of arguments or emotional tension, they begin to see things more clearly. They remember the kindness that was shown to them, the patience that met their fear, the gentle way the other person stayed when they wanted to run. It's in this stillness that guilt often sneaks in, not the kind that punishes, but the kind that quietly asks, "What if I was wrong?" For many avoidants, silence becomes the first honest mirror they've faced in a long time. It reflects not just the loss of another person, but the loss of opportunity, the chance to be seen, to grow, to finally experience the intimacy they secretly crave. They realize that pushing someone away doesn't erase the need for love, it just buries it deeper, and when that love is gone, they're left with an emptiness that even solitude can't soothe. The silence also teaches them something about patterns. It shows them how their instinct to withdraw isn't protecting them, it's isolating them. In that space, they can see the trail of broken connections left behind, people who cared, who tried, who waited. And while they might tell themselves they're better alone, a small voice inside begins to question that story, because loneliness, no matter how familiar, never feels like safety for long. Eventually, silence becomes both punishment and possibility. It hurts, yes, but it also opens a door. It gives them room to reflect, to feel, to understand that maybe running isn't the solution. Maybe the very discomfort they've spent their life avoiding is the path to real connection. And if they're brave enough to listen to that silence, really listen, they might finally hear what their heart has been trying to say all along, that it's time to stop pushing love away and start learning how to let it stay. They feel the loss more deeply than they show. When an avoidant person pushes away the right one, the aftermath looks calm on the surface. They seem composed, detached, maybe even indifferent. They go about their daily lives, keeping routines intact, appearing unaffected to everyone around them. But beneath that quiet exterior, an emotional storm brews, one they would never let anyone see. The truth is, avoidants feel everything. They just don't know how to process or express it. Their pain hides behind control, their longing disguised as indifference. To admit they're hurting would mean admitting they care, and for someone terrified of vulnerability, that admission feels unbearable. At first, they cling to the illusion that they've done the right thing. They tell themselves it was for the best, that the relationship was too intense, too risky, too demanding. But emotional detachment is only a temporary refuge. As time passes, memories start to surface uninvited, vivid, and persistent. The sound of that person's laugh, the little rituals they shared, the comfort of knowing someone was there who genuinely understood them. These fragments start to pierce through the emotional armor they built, and though they try to shake them off, they linger. The loss begins to seep through the cracks of their defenses. Avoidants often grieve privately, even unconsciously. They don't cry openly or talk about their pain, but they feel it in subtler ways, in restless nights, in the sudden emptiness of a room, in the ache that follows a fleeting memory. Their heart feels the absence long before their mind is ready to admit it. They replay conversations in their head, moments when they said too little or pushed too hard. They remember the look of hurt in the other person's eyes and the silence that followed. These recollections become a quiet torment, haunting them in moments of solitude. The irony is that their silence makes it easy for others to assume they've moved on. Friends might say, they never really cared, or they're better off without it. But internally, they're wrestling with emotions that refuse to be neatly contained. They're haunted by what ifs. What if they had stayed? What if they had tried harder? What if they hadn't let fear dictate their choices? These questions don't go away easily. They replay like echoes of an unfinished song. And beneath all that reflection is longing, the longing for a connection they once had but couldn't hold on to. They start to miss the safety they felt in the presence of someone who truly saw them, even if being seen scared them. But because expressing that longing feels too vulnerable, they keep it hidden, pretending it doesn't exist. Yet the body knows, the heart knows, that ache becomes a quiet companion, a reminder of what was lost, not because love failed, but because fear won. Deep down, avoidants don't just miss the person. They miss the version of themselves that love brought out, the softer, braver, more open version they didn't realize existed until it was gone. They may not say it, they may never show it, but the loss of that connection leaves a mark that time alone cannot erase. Avoidance is self-protection that leads to self-sabotage. At its core, avoidance begins as a survival instinct, a shield built to protect against emotional harm. When someone grows up learning that closeness leads to pain, rejection, or disappointment, they start to associate intimacy with danger. The mind adapts by creating distance, convincing itself that being detached means being safe. So, when love appears instead of welcoming it, they retreat. They tell themselves it's too much, too soon, or not right. But what they're really doing is defending themselves against vulnerability, against the risk of being hurt the way they once were. At first, avoidance feels powerful. It feels like control. They get to decide when to engage and when to withdraw, when to feel and when to shut down. They believe this control keeps them safe from the chaos of emotions. But control built on fear is fragile. The more they pull back, the more disconnected they become, not just from others, but from themselves. They start to suppress emotions, numb their feelings, and convince themselves that love is a threat rather than a source of comfort. In trying to avoid pain, they end up avoiding joy too. The tragedy of avoidance is that it often destroys the very things it's trying to preserve. It pushes away good people who only wanted to love and understand them. It creates distance in moments when closeness is needed most, and over time, it builds a pattern, a loop of getting close, feeling overwhelmed, withdrawing, and then regretting the loss once it's too late. This cycle reinforces their belief that relationships always end in pain, when in reality, it's their fear that keeps recreating the same outcome. Avoidants often don't see this as self-sabotage at first. To them, stepping back feels logical. It's a way to regain emotional balance, but slowly they begin to notice the emptiness left behind. They notice that every time they run, they end up lonelier, even though loneliness was what they were trying to avoid in the first place. The very mechanism that was meant to protect them becomes the cage that traps them. They crave connection but fear it. They want love but can't trust it. They long for safety but destroy the safest thing they ever had: genuine intimacy. This contradiction becomes exhausting. They might tell themselves they're fine on their own, but deep down they feel the absence. They might even start to wonder why meaningful relationships always seem to slip away. The truth is, avoidance doesn't prevent heartbreak, it guarantees it. Because love requires the risk of being seen, of being imperfect, of being vulnerable. Without that risk, love can't grow. Eventually, the pain of staying closed off starts to outweigh the fear of opening up. That's when many avoidants begin to see their patterns clearly. They start realizing that self-protection without self-awareness isn't protection at all itself. Sabotage disguised as safety. The armor that once kept them safe becomes too heavy to carry, and only by putting it down can they finally experience the connection they've been missing all along. Healing begins when they stop running. For someone who has spent a lifetime avoiding closeness, the idea of staying, of facing emotions rather than escaping them, feels almost impossible. Running has always been their comfort zone, their way of maintaining control when feelings become too intense. But there comes a moment, usually after enough heartbreak or silence, when the exhaustion of avoidance catches up to them. They realize that no matter how far they run, the same feelings always follow. The loneliness, the regret, the longing, it all waits for them on the other side of every escape. And that's when healing quietly begins, not with a grand gesture, but with the decision to stop running. At first, stopping feels terrifying. It means facing the emotions they've buried for years. It means sitting in discomfort without shutting down, without numbing, without deflecting. It means acknowledging that fear has been steering their choices, not strength. For someone used to emotional distance, this awareness feels raw and unfamiliar, but it's also liberating, because in that moment of stillness, they finally begin to understand that avoiding pain doesn't prevent it, it just prolongs it. Healing starts when they allow themselves to feel what they've been running from. As they slow down, they begin to see their patterns clearly. They start to notice how every time love gets too close, their instinct is to protect, to withdraw, to sabotage. They begin connecting the dots, realizing that the walls they've built weren't signs of strength, but symptoms of fear, and the very things they thought made them safe have actually kept them trapped in cycles of loss. This realization doesn't come easily. It often arrives through pain, through watching good people walk away, through nights filled with regret. But awareness is the first step toward freedom. When avoidants stop running, they create space for vulnerability, the one thing they feared most. They start learning that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's truth. It's the courage to show up as they are, without hiding behind detachment or control. They start opening up in small ways, answering honestly when someone asks how they feel, allowing affection without flinching, or staying present during emotional conversations instead of shutting down. These small acts are monumental for someone who's spent years avoiding connection. With time, they begin to see that love isn't a threat, it's an opportunity. An opportunity to grow, to be known, to finally let someone in without fear of falling apart. Healing doesn't mean becoming fearless. It means learning to move forward even when fear is present. It means choosing connection over comfort, honesty over avoidance, and trust over control. And though it takes patience and courage, the reward is profound. Because once they stop running, they discover that love, real, safe, steady love, was never the danger they imagined. The danger was in the running itself, in never giving themselves the chance to be loved fully. When they finally stay, they don't just find another person, they find themselves. In the end, love isn't about never being afraid, it's about choosing courage over comfort, presence over protection, and growth over fear. Those who run eventually learn that the heart heals not through distance, but through honesty, connection, and the willingness to stay. And for anyone who has ever loved someone afraid to love you back, know that your love was not wasted. It was a seed that may one day teach them how to stop running. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for believing that even the most guarded hearts can learn to open again.